Hey, welcome everyone this morning to CPLEA's Got Debt webinar. My name is Judy Fang. I'm a staff lawyer at the Center for Public Legal Education Alberta, or CPLEA for short. And our goal is to make the law understandable for Albertans. We are a nonprofit organization serving all of Alberta, and we provide legal information and education through our various booklets, tip sheets, videos, webinars, websites, and more. With me today, I have Natalie Tremblay, our education and design specialist here at CPLEA, and the face behind our logo. And she will be monitoring the chat during the presentation and posting some links in there as we move through our content today. And of course, I'd like to introduce you to our guest speakers in attendance today. We have Judith Hainberry, Queen's Counsel. Judith recently retired after 14 years as a Master in Chambers in the Court of Queen's Bench in Calgary, and she has been spearheading a project to support individuals dealing with personal debt. And we will be talking more about this project throughout our webinar. And of course, we also have here Yves Boucher. Yves is a Money Mentors counselor based out of Red Deer. And Money Mentors is a nonprofit organization that helps Albertans get out of debt, manage their money, and plan for retirement. So before we start today, CPLEA respectfully acknowledges the traditional homeland of the many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. I am in Edmonton in Treaty 6, but we know people are joining us from across the province in Treaty 7 and 8. Okay, and as we move on a little bit to a little bit of a disclaimer. So the webinar contains legal information and is not intended to be legal advice. Funding for this webinar is provided by the Alberta Law Foundation and also Department of Justice Canada. And just a few housekeeping items as we're moving along. First of all, we're not circulating slides of today's presentation. The information covered is available in our tip sheets, which we will talk about a little bit later. And Natalie will be posting links in the chat. We will also be following up with a follow-up email with the links as well. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox. We are recording the webinar today, but it's only for internal purposes. Next thing I want to bring up is if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function, and we will get to the questions at the end of this webinar. And one last thing, you will be prompted to complete a short survey when you exit the webinar. All right, the point of the webinar today. Well, the consumer debt situation here in Alberta is tough. And if you or someone you know is in debt, well, you are not alone. And this is some of the data that I pulled from the NNP Consumer Debt Index update in October 2021. I basically come to the conclusion that the combination of low interest rates right now, tight household finances, and rising costs are leading to riskier paths to borrow. Some of the other highlights from that data, well, half of Albertans right now are $200 away or less from financial insolvency. Affordability concerns are widespread, with a large proportion of us believing that life's necessities have become much more expensive over the past year, as we all could relate to, like the costs of food, transportation, housing, clothing, household necessities. They have all gone up in the past year. And Albertans, well, we are significantly more likely to say that it's becoming harder to put money aside for savings, let alone towards debt. Okay, next thing here is that 6 in 10 of Albertans are likely to borrow money. And that was the stat before the end of 2021. And on top of that, 1 in 5, are likely to use buy now, pay later options, which have boomed during the pandemic. And what we want everyone to know through this webinar today is that yes, debt can be scary, but learning about how to deal with it doesn't have to be. And there's plenty of information, resources, and services out there to help you with debt problems. So what do we want to share with you today? Well, I'm going to start off with providing 5 quick tips and resources. And then we're going to hear from our 2 experts, Yves and Judith, through our Q&A session about many of these debt problems and also potential resolution options. All right, so tip number 1. First of all, debt issues can take many forms. The most obvious issue, of course, is not being able to pay bills, but there are maybe other issues as well. So for example, maybe there's problems with collection agencies, wages or accounts being garnished, maybe being sued or being subject to foreclosure proceedings. Maybe also situations of falling for a financial scam. Even perhaps acting as a guarantor and a situation where the borrower defaults. Okay, moving on to our next tip here. One important thing to keep in mind is that if you or someone you know has a court date, do not ignore it. Review the documents, see how to respond, and then get legal help right away. It may be a foreclosure proceeding or a civil lawsuit, definitely not something that you want to ignore. Okay, tip number 3, what we want you to know is that how we deal with debt depends on what kind of debt it is. So really we categorize debt in 2 ways. One being unsecured debt and the other being secured debt. So some examples of unsecured debt are credit card debt, student loans, outstanding bills. So you're looking at things like cell phone bills. Secured debt examples include lending a home, some home equity lines of credit, a vehicle or other recreational vehicle that is financed. So many of you are likely familiar with these types of debts, but let's dive a little bit more into secured debt. Okay, so secured debt really means that a lender requires the borrower to use its property as collateral for debt. If the borrower defaults on what we call a secured loan, then the lender can seize the property and it can use the property to repay the loan. One important thing to keep in mind is that there are 2 types of security. So mortgages, where the security is real estate, and registered security interest, where the security is property that you own other than real estate, such as a vehicle, maybe a mobile home, a recreational vehicle, or boat, or household goods. But really, when it comes to this, the bottom line of secured debt is that every type of secured debt is different. And really, you should be reading the agreement between the lender and the borrower to see what the lender's rights are and what the borrower's rights are. Okay, moving on to our next tip here. Many laws apply to personal debt issues. Some are federal, so they apply the same all across Canada, and others are provincial and only apply in Alberta. So as we move to, let's talk a little bit about, just a little bit about the law or legislation here that might apply to a debt issue. So Natalie, if you could pull up a poll here about the law or legislation applying to collection agency practices. Let's hear from you. So what do you think? Which law or legislation applies to collection agency practices? Do you think it's the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, the Law of Property Act, or the Consumer Protection Act? Okay, so do you have a little bit of scattered answers here? Most of you did indicate the Consumer Protection Act. What I would have to say in response is, yes, the Consumer Protection Act is the correct answer. So the Consumer Protection Act is provincial legislation, and it regulates a number of issues. So this would include things like unfair practices, credit reports, wage assignments, loan brokers, cost of credit disclosures, collection agencies, high cost credit, and also payday loans. So if you have any questions or concerns about any of these types of issues, you could contact Service Alberta's Consumer Investigations Unit. And this is their link here. And if you're looking for more information on collection agency practices, and I also let you know that you could refer to our publication on collection agencies on our website as well. Okay, so tip number 4, there are many options available to deal with debt. And they range from informal to more formal options, and really kind of depends on an individual's debt level, a number of creditors involved, also the likelihood of repaying debt. And what you need to know is that largely these options do look at unsecured debt. And we'll get a little bit more into these options as we chat with Eve and Judith in our Q&A. Okay, tip number 5. So this is my last quick tip here. Like I mentioned earlier, there are reliable resources to deal with debt. And I'd like to first share with you a guided pathway. So the first resource is the Help with Debt Alberta Guided Pathway, which is part of the Alberta Debtor Support Project that Judith has been working on. It is currently hosted on CPLEA's website, and the pathway asks debtors a series of questions to help narrow down what options are available to them. And here I'd like to mention that Natalie will be posting a link up. Just as a brief update as well, Judith, on this guided pathway, this has actually been one of our more popular pandemic resources. So, I mean, our web guy has informed us that we get an average of 350 users per month on this since it's launched, and it's relatively new as well. So those are pretty good numbers, I'd have to say.
That's good.
Yeah. And the next thing here, many of the tips I shared with you today are covered in more detail in CPLEA's Consumer Awareness Series. So we have resources on payday loans, foreclosures, as like I mentioned before, collection agencies, bankruptcy, being a guarantor, and of course, just options for dealing with debt problems. So that's all available on our CPLEA resources page. And I also like to mention here that we also have frequently asked questions on bankruptcy and consumer law issues available on our Law FAQs website. Okay, so I guess before we shift into the Q&A session, we do want to pull up a poll question, and I really should have brought it up a little bit earlier. But Natalie, let's try to gauge the audience a little bit and see whether people are familiar with some of these resources, that being CPLEA resources, Money Mentors, and also the Alberta Debtor Support Project. If you could just pull that up, let's hear from you. Okay, so let's see here. So familiarity with CPLEA resources. We have some people that are very familiar, but mostly it seems like somewhat and not familiar at all. Okay, that's good for us to know. And Money Mentors. Okay, so seems like the audience here, mostly on the very familiar and somewhat familiar end. So this is also good to know. And the Alberta Debtor Support Project. Well, a lot of not familiar at all. So that's why Judith is here today, and she will be explaining all the different components of the project and how it can help you. Okay, that is really good for us to know, and that's how we'll guide the discussion today. All right, so I'm going to pull up a quick link to Money Mentors here, and we will start off with Yves. Welcome, Yves.
Hi, thanks for having me on board today. I'm excited.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us this morning. So for people here today on our webinar, if you could just summarize quickly in a brief nutshell, who is Money Mentors and what does your organization do, especially for people who are not quite familiar with the organization itself?
Sure. Money Mentors is a not-for-profit organization that is Alberta-based. And essentially, our mission is to help Albertans be more successful with their finances. So we offer free money coaching, credit counseling, walking people through solutions when they're dealing with debt, as well as we're very big on helping educate the youth of Alberta, ages K through 12, grades K through 12 with Alberta curriculum-based instruction that we bring college teachers in to instruct the students for free for the schools, just to help kids get a better understanding of money too.
Okay, that's really good. That's so important. I feel like, yeah, if it's any time to start people, you'd start them young in terms of financial literacy. So that's great. And I understand it. You're a credit counselor.
Correct.
Yes. So what are the most common issues that people need help with when they come to you?
Well, there's a lot of them, but understanding credit, people that are new to the game that don't know what a credit report is or need help navigating how to build their credit. We deal with people that are experiencing troubles with debt payments and need solutions or guidance to best get through it. We also have people reaching out if they have auto loans that are possibly in default, possibly looking at seizure and what the outcome of that would be. And then we get people who just want to help have a budget plan created and guide them to future goals with their finances, be it owning a home or saving for retirement or just understanding their monthly income versus their spending and getting their ducks in a row.
Okay, well, that's good to know. It sounds like it's a wide range of services that the organization offers. So let's just walk me through this process a little bit. Let's say I'm in debt, Yves. And what can I expect if I contact Money Mentors? Like, do you have some sort of intake or a consultation process? And what would that look like?
We do. We have a great client services team who is the first point of contact for people when they call in. And client services will ask them a few general questions to get a feel for what help they need. And then they'll book them a free financial consultation with us over Zoom or phone. Before the pandemic, of course, we saw people in person, which we all would love to do that, but we're slowly navigating Zoom and getting good at doing that as well.
Yeah.
But essentially, when they reach out, it's confidential, we're unbiased, we just ask questions to get a feel for what the person is looking to achieve and make sure that we understand their need. Then we can plan from there how we can best help them. So we typically will do a spending plan with them, go through their income and expenses and who they owe money to, and then guide them. If it's credit help they're looking for building, we can refer them to free online courses that we offer to help them empower them to do better with their credit or improve or learn about it more detailed. But we want that one-on-one service to guide them in making changes in their budget to best serve what their goal is, or again, talking them through varying options if they're experiencing debt. So we can talk with them about anything they're interested in related to their credit or their money, but we dedicate 50 minutes of our time to be able to feel it out. And if we need to book second or third appointments, we are more than willing. We're here to help them for whatever questions they have.
Okay, well, that's really good to know. And we did mention a little bit earlier on about potential debt resolution options. So let's chat a little bit about this. And Judith, you'll feel free to jump in as well while we go through these potential options. And if it helps for the audience, like I could go back a couple of slides and we could just kind of talk through some of these potential options. Okay, so from what I understand, if we're kind of moving along the spectrum of potential options that are available, one of the first things that a person can do if they're in debt, depending on the situation, of course, maybe there's one or two creditors involved, could potentially negotiate payment plan with a lender. The lender doesn't necessarily have to negotiate with you, but it might be worth a shot, right? And as we kind of move away from that option, maybe the next step could be getting credit counseling. And Eve, what does credit counseling mean, and what's involved with that?
Well, to counsel someone if they're experiencing issues with creditors and they're worried, they don't know if they're going to be able to continue with their payments, or they're thinking, oh, I have to go bankrupt. As a credit counselor, we guide the client through all available options that could best serve them and kind of explain a bit about how each of those would play out. So we start with giving them a fresh set of eyes on their budget, because sometimes it could just be changes within their spending, or finding ways to generate more income that possibly they could save their credit and get through it on their own with that bit of guidance. But if that's not an option, we then go through kind of a circle of life like this chart shows here.
Yeah.
I'll talk with them about maybe refinancing. Maybe one of their loans is only 2 years left on it, but the payment's just too big because their income has kind of fallen lower than they used to make. Maybe they can refinance if their credit's still in good standings and stretch that loan out over a bit longer of a term to give them a lower payment to help them avoid having to do a formal solution. Okay. If that's not an option, then we talk about if they're homeowners, are they close to the mortgage renewal? Could they possibly renew early if they've got enough equity and get extra money from the equity in their home to pay off their debts to help alleviate that monthly payment commitment and again, save credit? We talk about consolidation loans, if the credit is in good standing, if that makes sense for the client, and if anything we can do to help them save their credit is top priority. But again, we bounce through these options, going from the best case scenario to the bottom options that are available for Albertans or for anyone. The final one is selling assets. If you have a home that has tons of equity and it makes sense to downsize and sell and pay off your debts and move forward with money in the bank. So lots of different things. Sometimes people own 2 or 3 vehicles. Maybe it's just, making it aware that, well, do you need 3 vehicles? Maybe you could sell 2 and pay off your debts and get through. Then if none of that is an option, we talk through the formal options when someone's experiencing crisis with debt, which would be consumer proposal, orderly payment of debt, and bankruptcy.
Oh, I see. And we did touch a little bit about the consolidation of loans. So from what I understand, consolidation loan might make sense if there's several creditors involved, but this would be an option you would have to take to your financial institution or your bank, right? So really, like the bank would have to determine whether you qualify for a consolidation loan. And the consolidation loan, as I understand it, pays off debts. And then, you would be responsible for making those payments to the bank, paying off that loan, but with hopefully lower interest rates, right? So, oftentimes when you take account different types of debt, they could be at different interest rates, right? So you could have a credit card debt, you have your lines of credit, overdue bills, all at different interest rates. But, hopefully out of that process, when you're consolidating a loan with your financial institution, you'd be able to lower that interest rate on that point.
Yeah, and hopefully it's because most people have compounding interest debt, credit cards, where that interest is it can be staggering and it can be overwhelming. Whereas consolidating to a term loan, typically it's not as much interest and the rate is lower.
Okay, that's really good to know. And it just, you did mention this, the debt management plan. Can you let us know a little bit just about the details about what this entails and what it's all about?
Sure. The Orderly Payment of Debt program is, we are the sole providers for the province of Alberta. We manage the OpD program on behalf of the provincial government. And basically that program is an option for clients that it stays the creditor's action and interest. It's a legal court order that stops that from continuing. And then we set the client up on a monthly payment plan up to 5 years long to pay their debts in full with 5% interest instead of the varying rates that they were dealing with. And typically it provides the client a shorter duration to get debt free, as well as a lower monthly payment. It doesn't work for everybody because they have to be able to have the ability to afford whatever that payment works out to be. But the OPD program provides great help for the clients. They can pay off the actual program faster than the term that is there without penalty or extra fee. And the OPD program, because it is legislated, it does affect your credit. The creditors are no longer being paid as you originally agreed. So they're going to log kind of negative on the credit report until about 2 years after you complete your program. Then those creditors fall off and don't show anymore.
Okay. So really, I'm looking at this as basically a court-ordered debt consolidation.
Yeah.
Then, right? So, okay, so that's good to know. And then we did talk more about consolidation. I keep going back to this point as well, because it just seems to be different types of consolidation options. So I understand that you could also consolidate unsecured debts into one affordable payment, and that could also be done with the assistance of credit counseling agencies such as Money Mentors. So this would, does it involve things like a fee as well to the agency, and as long with paying back debt?
The Money Mentors OPD program has a legislative fee of 10% of your payment to a maximum of $50. So if someone's got debt that the creditors with their 5% would be $200, the fee would be $20 each month. If it's more than $500 for their monthly payment, it caps at $50.
Oh, I see. Okay, and this would probably apply to other type of credit counseling agencies that have this type of service as well, right? So people can expect that there might be some administrative fee involved with using these services.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. And as we're moving along, the spectrum of potential solutions, like I'm looking at consumer proposal and bankruptcies as this is for more serious type of complicated type of debt debt situations, right? So
all three of them are the formal options, right?
Oh, the formal, yeah. So really, we're looking at the right here, the OPD and the consumer proposal and bankruptcy. These are the more formal options, and really kind of reserved, from what I understand, for more serious types of debt issues. So I mean, we could get a little bit into consumer proposal here. Sure. I understand that this is where you're working with a licensed insolvency trustee.
Correct. If a client, if the OPD program is maybe the payment isn't manageable within their budget, we will talk them through other options. Okay. A consumer proposal is a settlement offer of less than what you owe your creditors, based on a monthly payment plan up to 5 years long. It affects your credit for 3 years. Just simply because they're not getting all of their money, but even still you're protected. There's a legal stay, same thing as the OPD program. But first the trustee has to show the creditors, hey, if this person did a bankruptcy, what would you guys stand to get from it? And then make the proposal offer that much better so that the creditors are willing to take that settlement amount over payments over time.
Oh, I see. And I understand there's also like a fixed fee in doing a consumer proposal, and it looks like it's about $1,800. And the insolvency trustee receives about 20% of funds available. So it does kind of seem to me it's you do need to spend to do this type of proposal as well. And it really depends on the individual circumstances on whether this makes sense. And if this proposal fails, we're really looking at bankruptcy, are we not?
Sometimes yes, sometimes not. It just depends on each person's unique scenario and what's happening for them. Sometimes bankruptcy isn't the right option, and that's the reason the proposal is the best choice. It depends on their assets, their income, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, yes, if your consumer proposal fails, you're naturally looking at another solution to still have that protection from your creditors and get it finalized.
Okay, and then a bankruptcy, you'd also be working with a licensed insolvency trustee with that. And I understand that there's often a conception that once you declare bankruptcy, well, maybe you're getting a fresh start. And is that right?
Yes and no. A bankruptcy for a first timer is 9 to 21 months long that you're actually in the program, where there's a payment based on the trustee fee or surplus income calculation. If you earn more than the guideline for the number of people in your family that's set by the superintendent, you pay extra back to your debt in a bankruptcy. So that process can be 9 to 21 months long, and then it stays on your credit for 6 years after that. The critical thing for all three of the formal programs for people to understand, a lot of people, when they hear the word bankruptcy, they think, oh my gosh, 7 years bad credit. Oh my God, no credit for 7 years. It's actually not like that. You start rebuilding your credit as soon as you're done, whichever formal program you go through. You don't wait 6 years or 3 years or 2 years. And your counselor or administrator in the insolvency world would guide you through that and give you tips to rebuild. And in the orderly payment of debt program, we have people that are just coming out of bankruptcies or proposals that reach out for credit counseling sessions and utilize our courses to give them the best step forward to rebuilding their credit coming out of an insolvency.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So I mean, you could be further along in this, this charter process that we have here, but you could be using other types of services as you're trying to deal with a debt problem, right? So
correct. And if it's okay, I just wanted to step back to something that popped in my head really quick, if that's
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Bankruptcy and consumer proposal, typically, if you have student loan debt, you have to be out of school 7 years before it can be counted in one of those two programs.
Yeah.
The orderly payment of debt program it's kind of special in the sense that if someone comes to us, and lots of time trustees refer clients to us that have student loan debt that's not 7 years old, because the OpD program can count student loan debt, and we have the ability to stretch the payment beyond 5 years to help them have the lowest payment possible and give them that window of opportunity that, okay, in 86 months, I'm debt free from everything, my student loans, my unsecured debt. So it's a great opportunity for people that are struggling, because right now there's a lot of people with Alberta student loans that seem to be going into collections. Mm-hmm. So it's a good thing to know on that side out there.
Okay, well, thank you for that information. And I think as we move along here with our discussion, so Eve, what would be your top 3 money tips for people?
This I have to read a little bit at my notes, so forgive me, because I had a ton of them and I had to reduce them.
Whittle it down. Yeah.
So taking into consideration right now with the pandemic and how many people are on reduced hours at work or out of work or just going through very, very difficult times in their life, most people can't afford to save. But critically, we need to save, because if we're that tight in our budget, we're one accident or illness or car repair or just one glitch away from really big trouble, really big problems. So I like to walk clients through a savings plan where you equalize your bill payments based on your paydays. If you're paid twice a month, I'm just going to use that as an example. Try and have your bills split up between the 2 pays so that you have more of a common amount left over after you pay your bills, your groceries, and your gas. Let's pretend you had $300 left over after you paid all those on your payday. Take that $300 and divide it by the number of days until your next payday. It's going to give you a daily spending limit. Lock it in your head and try your best to stick within that limit. If it's $20 a day and today you've gone out and spent 40, well, in your head when you get home, okay, lunch from home, coffee from home, blinders driving home, or don't leave the house if it's a day off because there's more risk you'll spend money. You want to make up for that day that you overspent. In days you don't spend the $20, let's say you get home and you find out you only spent 18, transfer the $2 that you didn't spend to your savings instead of rolling it forward into the next day, the next day, the next day. If something major comes up, like you need a $70 prescription, how much do you have left in your bank now? Divide that by the new number of days remaining to your payday. Your daily spending limit went from 20 to 12. Work it out. As long as you know that number, it's just a little bit easier to stick to your plan, because one of the biggest things we hear is people are broke before payday. They feel like their expenses are too high. It's also very critical to monitor your spending and be aware of those hidden areas, like if you're a coffee buyer, or you go out for lunch, or you buy a lottery ticket every day, or maybe you think you're just getting fuel when you go to the fast gas, but then you find out on your receipt, oh, right, I bought a lottery ticket, a pack of gum, and oh yeah, a sub. Just hidden areas to just be aware of.
Mhm.
Then I wanted to mention, so basically saving what's left over. If you don't spend your 20, transfer the difference to your savings. And then at the end of the week, round down your checking account to the nearest $5 or $10, whatever is affordable. If you put $2.78 transferred to your savings, every little bit helps and it adds up. Even if it's only 200 you accrue, you close your eyes a little bit better at night, knowing that God forbid if something comes up the next day, you've got that little cushion. It just makes your rest a little easier. Okay. The other thing I would mention is each time you do an outing, if you are doing any, lots of us aren't right now, but let's say you did go out to the cheap theater for a movie, or you decided to meet a friend for a drink, transfer $5 to your savings for that night out or that event. Because if you can afford to go eat out or go for a drink or go to the movie, what's $5 to your savings? So you're just kind of paying yourself back because you had that little perk and you're taking what you can to put aside.
Mhm.
The third tip would be contact your loyalty departments with your cell phones, with your cable company. People don't realize all it takes sometimes is asking, hey, I've been a great paying customer for 3 years. And like, I don't like paying this much anymore. What are you going to do for me? I might call TELUS, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they give you little perks, like whether it's $5 off your bill, or maybe they give you a bump in your cable plan for no additional cost. Cell phones are famous for that as well. You can always get a better deal, so play that up. But of course, you have to be in good standings with the utilities to be able to make those kind of, hey.
Yeah, well, if you don't ask, you might not get anything out of it, right? So you might as well just try.
Exactly. And then the only other part that I wanted to bring up, I have lots of clients when we're doing the spending plan, they pay contents or tenants insurance.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the premium they're paying is quite high. So I'll ask them, well, what is your coverage? Like, how much are you covered for? Oh, like 70,000. And I'll say, okay, so you're living in a 2-bedroom apartment. If you took all the stuff that you have right now and threw it on the lawn and sold it, what do you think you'd get? And then I say, okay, and now to replace that, what do you think it would cost? And usually they're like, 15,000 roughly.
Yes.
So why do you need 80,000 contents coverage, right? So
Yes.
It helps them save money on their premium, because the insurance brokers, I love them. I have lots of friends in insurance, but they typically will quote the best level of that insurance first. If you balk at that, then they'll back it down, right? They're making money too. And then the final little one about household costs is, if you're a 2-person household, don't use your dishwasher.
Okay.
It's very expensive to wash and dry your dishwasher. And if it's just 2 of you, it's just your cereal bowl, your coffee cup, and then your supper dishes. It helps save on water and energy, as well as double spin your load in your washer before you put it in the dryer, because it takes more of the water out of your clothes and helps reduce your energy cost.
Great. Well, these are all really, these are great tips, even just very practical as well. So, we are halfway over the presentation. So, we're going to turn this over to Judith, and we're going to hear more about her project. So thanks, Eve.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit later too, once we get into the audience discussion, if we have any further questions.
Actually, I have a question for Eve before we move over, Judy. I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying though. So the work you do, Eve, is quite different than the work we do, but we do collaborate to some degree. And when you search credit counseling on the internet, all kinds of things come up. Like, it's amazing what comes up. And for a while, I was a registrar in bankruptcy. That was one of the positions I had. And I would see people that had gone to credit counseling agencies that were not bona fide. Do you have any suggestions or advice to people? I mean, it was heartbreaking sometimes. They would have given money to credit counseling agencies that said, we can make a deal with your creditors and you won't have to pay all your debt. And then the money disappeared down some black hole, and I would see them in bankruptcy in tears. So do you have any suggestions or ideas for people to make sure they get to bona fide resources?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that is a big thing that we deal with daily, is people calling in where they did some sort of informal proposal from an online site where they never met a person and they had to pay this big fee. But in the meantime, creditors are still hounding and calling them, interest is still accruing, and their credit's just going to the mud. Those are informal credit counseling companies. They are not, Credit Counseling Society of Canada. They are not money mentors programs. So I always tell clients, if you're thinking of looking into a proposal, make sure you are reaching out to a licensed insolvency trustee. Any of our clients that they're leaning that way, we give them the link to the OSB site so that they can search their area and find a licensed trustee. I tell them to make sure that they're seeing someone in person. Now, of course, with the pandemic, we do Zoom affidavits and such, but the informal places, you never see a person. It's just an email of some stuff, and all of a sudden you're bound to this and they're taking your money. So I always tell them you should be seeing a trustee in person to swear your affidavit, or now by Zoom. And I don't like to put names out there, but I do advise clients to avoid a certain informal company, because they're a middleman. They basically say, oh yeah, we're going to get you into a consumer proposal, and yeah, we're just going to need you to pay us $400 a month for however many months, and we'll get you all taken care of. Again, same story. They don't get the protection. The interest is still accruing and their debt's going sour. Once they complete that fee payment to that middleman, he walks them over to their trustee friend, and then the trustee has to put them into a proposal all over again, where they're paying a fee to the trustee and everything else. So skip the middleman, go directly to a licensed insolvency trustee, avoid informal debt settlement companies like the plague.
Great. All right, Judith, take it away with your project.
Okay, so I spent 14 years on the bench as a registrar in bankruptcy and also a master in chambers. Most people don't know what a master in chambers does, but part of my work would be hearing foreclosure applications 5 mornings a week. So I retired, fortunately, I think, right before the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, I thought, ooh, I think there's going to be some new resources needed here, because there's going to be a lot of people in trouble. This was before I knew there'd be any government intervention, but the pandemic also has gone on longer than I think I expected and most people expected. And so even though the government did intervene, there's still a lot of people in trouble. So I looked around, and there were 2 areas where I thought there was a need, and partly it was in relation to the scams that I had seen, such as I just mentioned. I'd seen scams both in the the unsecured debt side, where people were in bankruptcy or needed credit help. And also I'd seen big scams on the foreclosure side. So the first thing that I did was I reached out with some other lawyers to CPLEA and asked if they would help us put together this Help with Debt Alberta guided pathway website. And it doesn't answer, it doesn't give you all the answers to all your questions. The goal of that website is to ask you questions about what kind of debt you have, if you've already been sued, how many debts you have, how many creditors are coming after you. And then it sends you to reliable resources so that people avoid the scam artists who, at least in my experience, seem to come out of the woodwork whenever there's a downturn in Alberta. I mean, I saw them again at the start of the pandemic, the little handwritten signs on the boulevards saying, sell your house to me, get rid of your debt, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that resource got set up, and now CPLEA is running it, and we're very grateful for all the work they've done, and I'm happy to hear it's been a success. Mm-hmm. So it's got some fabulous links in it to bona fide resources that will help people that and steer them away from anyone who's going to try and part them inappropriately from their hard-earned cash. Mm-hmm. So that was one resource that we got going, a group of us. And then the second was in relation to debtors who were basically either on the cusp of being sued or had already been sued. And for those people, especially with foreclosures, what I saw in the courtroom was people who perhaps could have tried to save their house, and they were very confused about the process. They were trying right on not even on the courthouse steps, but literally in the courtroom, trying to make deals with their creditor when it could have been dealt with quite a bit earlier and perhaps been more successful, and it was just simply too late to try and pull them out of the hole that they were in. So a wide group of people across the legal profession got together and put together this program called the Consumer Debt Negotiation Project. And what it is it's a resource staffed entirely by volunteer lawyers that provides debt help to people who basically they need legal debt help. So we refer out to trustees, licensed insolvency trustees. We refer out to money mentors and so on. We don't do financial counseling. We're not experienced or remotely competent to do that. But we help them figure out from a legal perspective what they can do to move forward, and we will negotiate with their creditors. It tends to be primarily people in foreclosure. It tends to be secured creditors that we deal with, and we will walk them step by step through the process, help them understand the legal process that's going to occur, see if we can find an off-ramp that makes sense for them. Sometimes it's saving their house. Sometimes it's other things. Some people just want to stay in their house till the kids are finished school for the school year, or they're expecting a baby and they want to have that baby before they have to move. Some people are just want to get rid of the house as quickly as they can. It's just causing them incredible stress. They might have the kind of mortgage where they're personally liable, in which case we'll try to speed up the process as much as we possibly can to reduce the amount that they might owe if their house is worth less than what is owing on the debt. So those are the kinds of things we do. It's all virtual. It covers anybody in Alberta, or even we've actually got one or two people outside Alberta who have property in Alberta. So there is no criteria as far as what income you make. I think I did fire one or two people who could clearly afford lawyers and just had overlooked making a payment because they weren't living here. But we help anyone and everyone, because by the time you get to the point where you're being sued on your debt, whether it's a foreclosure for your house or whether it's your credit cards, you're usually in financial trouble. So we're open to whoever needs our help.
Well, yeah, exactly. And this goes back to the earlier tip I had, like, anytime you're dealing with a potential legal issue, you get legal advice. You go find a lawyer, right? So that's really good to know. I actually was going to ask you the question about whether there was any eligibility criteria, but it sounds like, anyone and everyone is welcome to use the service. So that's great to know. And Judith, like, what have been your experiences so far with this project since its launch? Like, it sounds like it's been, very successful given the short amount of time, but what have been some of the challenges with this project as well?
Well, I think our biggest challenge has been getting the word out. I mean, I have some great volunteers who are very experienced and very dedicated, and getting the word out has been difficult. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges. I think one of the other challenges has been getting people in the door before it's too late. And I certainly understand, and I'm sure Eve has seen it as well. People, they just hard to deal with your debt. People feel, especially the thought of losing their home. If they have a family, or if they've had someone in their family co-sign their mortgage, for example, they're embarrassed, they're uncomfortable, and they just try to ignore it. And the reaction we get from people is, once we talk to them, even if we can't find a way forward to negotiate a plan to save their home, even if they understand the process and what we can do for them and what their liabilities are or are not, there is such a relief from the stress that they've been feeling. So many people at the end of the first interview have said, I feel so much better. That is such a huge weight off my shoulders. It's the foreclosure process, and most of the people we see are in foreclosure. It's been heavily skewed that way, much higher than I had expected. The foreclosure process is complicated. Lots of lawyers don't understand it. It's very tricky, and to have someone sit down and take an hour and walk them through it and explain it and make sure they understand each step of the way, I think provides a great sense of relief to people to know what's coming down the road.
Yeah. Part of just the expectations, right? So being able to know and be aware of that, and potentially what you could do in that process, that's a big relief to people. And I mean, you mentioned foreclosure as a top problem that it seems like people are facing with right now. And so what are some other, like maybe the other two top problems or issues that people using your project services are currently face as well? Can you maybe like elaborate on what some of those issues might be?
Credit cards. I think that's the second and the third is
okay.
credit cards.
Credit cards. Okay.
Yeah. It's, when we used to pay cash in the olden days, which I date myself by saying, there was some money in your wallet and you spent it and it was there or it wasn't there. I mean, I remember I was working in a bank actually when credit cards sort of first came in and they gave them to bank employees to try them out. And it was, it was such a new and exciting thing. And now it's devastated so many people's lives because it's so easy. And I've seen that with this project, with the people we've worked with, but then I also saw it in my time on the bench. Someone making 35, Eve can tell worse stories than me, I'm sure, making $35,000 with 5 credit cards and $150,000 in debt. And it's just, credit cards. As one of my clients said to me the other day, I think I finally understand the bank is not my friend. And no, I mean, the bank is your friend in a way, but the bank is a business institution that is designed to make a profit. And just because they're offering you a credit card doesn't mean you should take it.
Well, and that's why you need to read the fine print as well, right? Like, right? I mean, sometimes you sign up for those things because it has a very attractive, interest rate or whatever perk it is. Maybe you get some cash back, but what's beyond that? Like,
and it's the same with mortgages. It used to be you got a mortgage and it was a simple mortgage. And now they have these new products that are so complicated. So you can have something that's sort of a mortgage, but it's got a credit card attached to it, and then it's got a line of credit. Well, if you've taken a straight mortgage, you might not have any personal liability. So if your life goes sideways, then at that point, you might be in a position where you can walk away from your house if there's no equity left in it. Some of these products are so complex and so complicated, it's hard to understand when there's personal liability and when there isn't. And even the lawyers that we work with on this who are working on this project have sometimes difficulty understanding these new products because the banks are coming up with them all the time. So that I think is also challenging for us as well as lawyers, and also for people who are buying houses, because again, these products can be attractive. What the bank says and we'll say to people is, look, we'll just take a sort of a blanket charge over your house right up to what it's worth. Now you're only borrowing 3/4 or 2/3 of what it's worth, but then we'll give you this line of credit. And if you want to do a renovation, and it gets very, very complicated for people. Yeah. Okay. And that is challenging.
Okay. It's so, I mean, really, what is next for this project moving forward, Judith?
So we're with the Public Interest Law Clinic at the University of Calgary. So when I came up with this idea and got a group of interested people, we were looking for a home because we couldn't start from scratch without someone to give us at least a virtual home. And the Public Interest Law Clinic said it would take us on, and they have, but it was time limited. It goes to June of this year. So the next big challenge I think we have is deciding what we're going to do moving forward. I had hoped that the need would dissipate and the pandemic would have ended by now, and we would all be on a footing, a good financial footing, back to sort of where we were before. Mm-hmm. I think what we're going to see is that things maybe are going to get a little bit worse before they get better. Yes. Because there's not as much support for people from the government, and there's people faced with intermittent jobs. Mm-hmm. We've got our oil and gas industry, which historically has gone up and down. I've seen several of the rises and the falls over my time practicing law. So I think that finding a new home is going to be a bit of a challenge for us. We're hoping one of the other pro bono organizations in Alberta will take us on. We're kind of different because most of the pro bono organizations you get help from in Alberta are limited to certain geographic areas, whereas and they see people in person. We're entirely virtual, which has worked great for our volunteers, right? So they can work it in between whatever else they're doing with their lives. They see people in the evening, in the afternoon, whatever works for them. So we're entirely virtual, and we serve all of Alberta, which is both of those, I think, are a first in Alberta for pro bono.
Yes.
So so that's going to be our challenge, is making sure we can keep the project going until we're in a position where hopefully this, I don't know if the pandemic is going to come to an end, but it tapers off and everyone who can is able to go back to work again and get going with their lives.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Judith. And really, this takes us to, I guess, the end of our webinar, but we do want to leave a little bit of time for just questions from the audience. So I do see here that there's one question that popped in the Q&A, so I'll just take a little bit of a look here. So how is Money Mentors different from credit counseling services of Alberta other than having the OpD program? So Yves, maybe you want to tackle this one?
I wish I had a more informed answer for you on that, but as to my knowledge, they're quite comparable to our program. And yeah, the OpD program is what we manage on behalf of the provincial government. So they offer the same kind of services as far as the money coaching and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I actually had emailed my team lead to ask that question when I saw it, because that's not something, I don't know a wide amount about credit counseling services in Alberta, so I apologize that I can't answer that better.
Okay, and then I guess this is a comment here. CCSA is a legal name for
there we
money.
go.
Okay,
Thank
it
you,
is the same
Michelle.
Michelle.
I'm like, I know it's in our brand, in our mission statement for my stakeholder, but when I saw the question, I was like, oh, sorry.
Right. Do we have any? Oh, no open questions right now. Do you ever work with for-profits to increase awareness? Maybe this is, I assume this is a question for both of you. Does your organization work with for-profit organizations?
We refer people, but we don't refer people to any specific, for example, any specific licensed insolvency trustee or any specific for-profit organization. So we refer people out, but we'll give them the list. Yeah. So if that's what the question was aimed at, we don't know.
Same with Money Mentors. We network with a lot of places in our cities and in our province, but we offer the link for licensed insolvency trustees so that the client can find the trustee that best suits them for their area. But we do talk with a lot of businesses out and about just to get the word out about what we offer. And that's how we get a lot of referrals too, is they meet people that have a need for the program or services.
I think that has been answered. Sometimes I think we get like questions in chat too. So I'm just going to do a quick skim of the chat box just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay, it looks like this is good. And we might not have any further questions. So, really thank you, Yves and Judith, for joining us this morning for this webinar. Lots of good information, lots of good tips, and hopefully for our audience here today, learned a lot more about these resources, but also the different ways to deal with debt problems. So just before we leave for today, I do want to do a little bit of a plug for upcoming webinars. So we have an amazing lineup in store for planning for the future. So check that out in the next month or so. We're covering topics such as mental capacity, making a will, and personal directives and powers of attorney. So if you're curious about those types of topics, please feel free to join us.
Judy, a disembodied voice here. A few items have popped up on the Q&A.
Oh, have they?
box,
Okay,
yeah.
I am so sorry. Okay. Well, if you and Judith still have some time to, help answer some of these questions, we could go through some of this, right? So, is that okay? Yeah, everyone have time for this? Okay. So, whoever wants to stay on the call, we could keep answering some of these questions too. So first question here is, do trustees all charge similar fees?
That's a good question to which I don't know the answer. I think they do.
What was the question, sorry?
The question is, do trustees all charge similar fees?
They are comparable, yes. I've seen them range from 200 to 250 depending, but I believe there is a cap set under the OSB, if I'm correct, that they can't gouge a client. There is parameters around that to my knowledge, but typically a fee for a first-time bankruptcy prior to 2018 was about $1,800. I've seen clients that I've talked with that now it's more around $2,200 or $2,000. But they are fairly comparable. You can ask them, you can contact them, you can have an appointment with 3 different trustees if you want to see who you want to go with. You might have a good feel for one or a bad feel for another, but they will tell you what their fee is for a bankruptcy.
We should mention, Eve, as well, that there is also a program for people who can't afford to go bankrupt.
Yes, the bankruptcy assistance program. Yes.
Yeah. So if you can't afford the fees, there is still a way to get help, and we refer people to that program as well. Yes. One thing, Judy, if you wouldn't mind, is when you send out the links, if you could put in the link for the Consumer Debt Negotiation Project. I don't know if you've included it or not.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll make a note of that. And when we send out a follow-up email, I do see we do have, the questions keep rolling in a little bit. So maybe, we could try to end the session within 10 minutes, but we'll go through some of these questions. So a question about someone's a family mediator and often refer people to money mentors to develop a budget for the purposes of property division. Quite often they have questions about their mortgage. So is there any sources of information available for them?
Absolutely. They can check out our resource tab on our website. There's a wealth of information in there. And when they do have that appointment with the counselor and discuss the details of what they're looking to do, the counselor will guide them through the resource map.
Okay. Great. That's good to know. And we had a question about where we could access the recording. I did mention a little bit earlier on at the beginning of this webinar, we are recording this, but the original intention was just for internal purposes only. So we will be sending out a follow-up email at the end of this with some links to the resources that we talked about today and also the tips. There's also further to a question about mortgage. Sometimes the amount owing on the mortgage is higher than the value of the house. People who have both names on their mortgages are a bit stuck.
So that depends. The short answer is it depends on whether you've got an insured mortgage. So that's a mortgage like a PMHC insured mortgage. Most people will know if they have that because you pay a fee of, say, usually it's in the thousands of dollars, and you have put down a low down payment. If that case you have personal liability, you're kind of stuck. But there are things, it's a long story, so there are things we can do. If in fact you don't have that kind of mortgage in Alberta, if it's a personal mortgage that you've got, we're not talking corporations, you can walk away. Sometimes we've worked with people to do short sales where the bank works with the people to sell the house because they think because they think it will have less effect on the credit rating. I don't know if that's true or not, frankly, but they just want to do the honorable thing, sell their house, even though it's worth less than what's owing to the bank. So there's a bunch of options. They depend on what kind of mortgage you have and what your goal is. So it's not the end of having a house that is worth less than your mortgage is not the end of the world. And I'll just mention one file that I had recently where the house had dropped in value and it was $60,000 less than what was owing on the mortgage. And the people had lost their jobs, gotten new jobs, but making much less money than before. We actually worked with, it was an insured loan, it was CMHC. We worked with CMHC and the bank, and the people kept their house. They were, I can't remember how many, 9 months in arrears on their mortgage. So there are options out there. You just have to, sometimes it works. I mean, in that case, I thought I pulled a rabbit out of a hat. Sometimes it doesn't, but there are options to consider.
Okay, so I think that's about it for our questions. I feel like we've covered most of them, and I don't think there's really anything further in chat. So, this will conclude our webinar for this morning. And like I said before, thank you so much for your time today, Eve and Judith. And for the audience members that are still out there right now, just remember, as you're exiting our webinar, there is a survey that you can complete, and your feedback is very welcome, because that also helps improve any potential webinar offerings in the future at CPLEA. So thank you so much, everyone, and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.